Hello folks, and welcome to another Richard Head Longbows video, the channel that helps you make bows and arrows and tells you lots of interesting archery related things. Well, hopefully they're interesting anyway. If you haven't watched us before, please do subscribe and like and all that other groovy stuff. We'd really appreciate it. And if you're interested in learning a bit about arrows, well, that's what we're talking about today.
Oh, good.
One of the
I want to learn.
Do you want to learn? Oh, yeah, bugger. I was hoping you were going to tell us some stuff. One of the things that often happens with people that contact us is that they've perhaps bought a longbow, or maybe not even a longbow, but generally people ask us about the longbow and they'll say, I can't achieve this distance, or I'm having trouble hitting this sort of target. And it usually transpires it's perhaps their first longbow, and more often than not their first set of arrows, and they've only got one set. And I think some people think that's going to do everything for them. Yeah. Which is the problem we find, and then they're surprised to hear there's other types of arrows that would be better suited to the discipline that they're trying to shoot in. So, for example, this is pretty common. That's a sort of set you might get when you buy a bow. What sort of set is this for?
Well, this I would use for field shooting. That's in the woods. If you're unaware of what field shooting is, look it up on the internet. It's in woodland, shooting at animal type targets. So it's sort of simulating hunting. Hunting's illegal in this country, so we're not trying to practice killing anything. But it's one of the very early basic sports of archery, or types of archery, where you're shooting instinctively at unknown distances, usually quite close distances.
Well, I was going to say, this is the point we're getting at here. The field shooting tends to be close up. So why is this arrow suited for that sort of thing?
Right. Larger fletch steadies the arrow up more quickly. And if you're shooting in woods between trees, and they'll cunningly place the target so you've got to shoot between a couple of trees, you don't want the arrow going all over the place. You want it to steady up quickly. And because you're not shooting vast distances, the larger fletch will obviously slow an arrow down. There's more resistance, air resistance. But at close distances, it doesn't matter. You're trying to straighten the arrow as quickly as possible, and that larger fletching does the job. The other end, we've got a field pile, usually 100 grain, 125 grain. A bit more forward weight, again, helps that steadiness, getting that arrow straightening up.
So that's on the heavier end of the weights, the sort of 125?
It would be. And at the closer distance, fine. You're wanting that arrow to straighten up quickly and stay straight. It's got a long sort of nose on it, which helps it stick in modern targets, which are made of a dense foam, and it stops it glancing off the edge or bouncing back out. So it just helps that. So that's basically a field arrow.
So this tends to be, when we get contacted by people with this issue, this tends to be what they've bought initially with their bow. Or bought from a shop or whatever. They tend to be a larger fletched arrow.
Yeah.
But they're then wanting to try other disciplines, or in fact didn't even know about field shooting and didn't buy the bow for field shooting, didn't buy the arrows for field shooting. They've just have been misadvised, really, and been sold something with a larger fletching. So if people want to do target shooting, which is a longer distance, say even 100 yards with the longbow, what changes or what other set do they need to make or buy that's going to be better suited for that?
Yeah, well, if they want to shoot 100 yards, if they've got a very heavy bow, okay, but most people don't. And there's a limit on the weight of bow you can have for target shooting. Right. So 80, 100 yards, this will slow the arrow down quite a lot, so you're having to aim very high, way above the target. In order to try and get that aiming point down nearer to the target, you want to cut the fletches down in size. So that, in comparison, 4-inch, that's 2.5 inch. So much less drag on that. So that will make sure that the arrow doesn't slow down quite as quickly and will help that distance. And the other end, unlike the slightly heavier field pile, we've got a brass pile, about 60 grains.
So it's half the weight at least of the other one.
It's an awful lot less. So you've got less weight to project through the air. So both those things will help get that extra distance and bring your aim down closer to the target at the longer distances. Might not solve it completely. A lot of it will depend on your loose, the type of bow, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
but basically the arrows, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Field shooting, close distance, even target shooting at close distance, indoors.
I was going to say, if you're doing indoor shooting,
People
then,
will use
yeah.
these because you're shooting close, you want the arrows to straighten quickly. Great. 4-inch, even bigger if you like. But if you're getting 80, 100 yards and you're getting trouble, go down to a smaller fletch. And these are 2.5-inch parabolic fletches.
So I mean, we would say, as people who've been shooting a long time and use the longbow a lot, these are the two main sets in your armoury that you'd have. These are going to do the vast majority of your everyday target type shooting sports.
That's right.
Your field shooting and your target shooting, which tends to be in a field of relatively long distance. That's mainly what people are going to have both sets.
And most people will have this. It's just a parallel shaft, no fancy trying to bobtail them or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just a plain parallel shaft, which most people will use, and they will work as well as you could expect them
And
to.
just because I think people will probably ask, is there any difference in the shape other than the name of the shape? These are a shield shape, these are a parabolic shape. I'm assuming it's just the size and the height that make the difference. The actual shape doesn't make any difference.
It's just that some people like this shield shape. I believe that True Flight, who make these feathers over in America, have done wind tunnel testing with the different shapes, and it doesn't appear to make any
So it's really the size and
in
length
speed.
that's-
It's
yeah.
the size, the length of them.
Okay. And just to be clear, length, they're sold in lengths. So these are, say, a 4-inch fletch, these shield-shaped ones. Obviously, the height is the distance between the shaft and the top edge of the feather. The reason I mention that is because the next thing you can do is you can do by hand if you're doing distance-type competitions. What sort of competitions are?
Well, clout.
So clout.
Clout shooting, where you're shooting 180 yards to a target on the ground. You want an arrow that's going to reach that distance with the bow that you have. And a lot of people haven't got a particularly heavy bow. They want to use their target bow, and they're hoping they can reach the clout. A lot of people will start off using those, won't get anywhere near it. The target arrows may get close, but the other option is a clout arrow. You can have those back. Now this has been actually tapered down towards the pile end, so you've got a very light pile. You've got a 20 grain pile, so very light. You're reducing the weight of the arrow. You've taken some wood off there. You've got to put a hardwood footing, because once the pine shaft gets very small, it's in danger of breaking.
Right.
So it's got a footing on it to strengthen it. Tapers back a little bit to the other end, and a very small knock. And the fletches, those look like they're probably about a 3-inch fletch, but they've been cut down in height to about 1/4 of an inch high.
So that's somewhere in between.
Yeah, they're slightly longer. We now usually use a 2.5-inch fletch, but cut the height down, cut it down to about that much, about 1/4 of an inch. That reduces the drag again, and that's the big thing that slows the arrow down, the amount of feather on it going through the wind and being slowed down by the air. So cut that down, and you're reducing the weight of the shaft a little bit by tapering the ends down, but you're not affecting the spine greatly. And that will give you that extra little bit of difference. So if you're just dropping a few yards short, use your target arrows, cut the fletches down in height, see if that makes a difference.
Yeah.
That might give you those few extra yards before you go to the trouble and expense of having barreled, footed arrows, which start to become expensive.
I was going to say, most people don't need to.
No.
And particularly if you're not thinking of doing the sport very often, you might only want to try it once and see whether you like it. You don't have to, none of these things that we're suggesting, you don't have to go out and buy 4 sets of arrows if you don't want to. You can try and see whether your arrows perform for you in whatever discipline it is you're trying. But if you find that you're not achieving those distances, or the arrows are flying around too much, then you may find you do need to change to one of these types of arrows that we're talking about.
Yeah, but do you want to start paying £30 an arrow for these just to try it out?
Just to try it.
Not worth it.
It's not necessarily worth it. And why have I got this one?
Oh,
What is
goodness
this one?
knows. If you're trying for distance shooting, you're not trying to hit any particular target on the ground. You're not 180 yards. You just want to see how far an arrow will go.
Right.
And there is one of the disciplines of archery, which is flight shooting, just to see how far you can shoot an arrow. And there are records for that, obviously. This one, as you can see, we've cut the fletches down even more. The nock is a horn nock, so more aerodynamic than the plastic nock, which is a little bit bulbous actually. So very small fletches, cut that drag down, and again footed end down to a 20 grain pile. So it's just an arrow for distance shooting.
And I think to give some sort of better idea of drag, and Richard's talking about drag of feathers, I mean, we do specifically use types of arrows to increase the drag.
Yes, I mean, this is a flu arrow. The Turks used to use something like this. They were very keen on distance shooting. That was their main aim in life, was to shoot arrows as far as they could. You don't want to walk, I mean, the record, I don't know what it is at the moment, but it was over a mile with a modern bow shot in proper conditions in America on the salt flats. So you don't want to have to walk a mile to get your arrow back to have another go.
No.
So they developed this type of arrow called a flu, and this is one feather spirally bound around the shaft, and it slows it down an awful lot. They use them now in medieval reenactments with a rubber blunt on the end for safety. They look impressive going up in the air, but they almost parachute down. You can almost catch them as they come down. So they don't go very far, but you can practice the techniques of flight shooting, and a lot of it is technique, including clout shooting. You know, you've got to get that loose, slashing loose, and everything else. And you can practice the distance shooting if you haven't got a huge range. You can practice with these, which are good.
I mean, so that as Richard said, that's one spirally bound.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. This is another version where there's just many feathers.
Yeah,
like
there's six on there, so you can put 3 on and a flickering jig, move it around and put another 3 on.
Yeah, so it's an easier way.
That does the same thing. And again, this is quite popular in reenactments because it perhaps looks a little bit more like an arrow than this. People think, oh, what's that?
The toilet
cleaning,
brush.
Yeah. So it looks a bit more, but it does the same sort of job.
What's this one?
Well, we've got a selection of arrows here, just for interest's sake. This is a whistling arrow, and the little head, and it's got some holes in it, so as it goes through the air, it makes a whistling sound. These, does it come off? Yes, it does. These unscrew so you can get the mud out of them, because once it's full of mud, it doesn't work anymore. So unscrews, you can get the mud out. So whistling arrows, quite good at a roving type shoot where you're shooting up in the air at unknown distances a long way away. That whistle makes it interesting. Sometimes they have everyone shooting a whistling arrow, and that sounds pretty good. This is an arrow with fletches each end.
Which is very useful.
It certainly is. Why did we make this one?
Don't know. I don't know why we did that.
Anyway, this is an arrow with fletches each end, so you don't see many of those anymore. Luckily, it obviously didn't work.
Hopefully, that's cleared up some of that for you. So yeah, if you're after doing a specific archery discipline, be it flight, clout, or target, or field, there are different types of arrows that are going to help you with that particular discipline that you're interested in doing. As we say, don't necessarily need to go out and buy 4 sets of arrows straight away. Have a go at that particular type of archery before you worry too much about it. And also, as Richard mentioned, quite a lot of shooting comes down to technique. People who are perhaps struggling with distance shooting, or even shooting 100 yards, it may simply be down to the tab that you're using, or just the experience that you've had. So don't be put off, but do remember, yes, sometimes it can be the equipment. I know that's the usual excuse that archers use, and probably most people in sport blame their equipment. But yes, there are horses for courses, so do make sure you're using the right thing. If you need any more advice, or you want us to make you up a set of arrows for a particular type of archery, or you want to buy the materials but are not quite sure what materials to choose, obviously give us a call, give us an email, and we will help you buy the correct bits and pieces. Anyway, there we are, folks. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.